Hello and welcome back to Dan Cave, and welcome to part 2 of the Tamiya 12 scale Suzuki GSX-RR video build series. So, the keen-eyed among you may have noticed I'm still wearing the same t-shirt as I was in part 1. And there's a reason for that, because I'm recording the intro and the outro for part 1 and part 2 at the same time. Because I had most of the footage, haven't managed to get it all edited. Wanted to get part 1 out there, so I said I'll do the intro and outro. I'm going on holiday, so I said I wanted to get the intro and outro done for part 2, and I may get some time to do some editing while I'm away. So that's the plan. I don't know if that will actually happen, but I'm still recording the intro and outro for part 2 on the hope that we're in that position. However, this is part 2. This is going to pick up from where we left in part 1. And we'll kind of bring all the bodywork up to being clear coated and left to then sit and cure fully while we can kick on with some other bits in part 3, etc. So part 2 would just cover whatever we left off from part 1 up to that point. So if you're new here, not a subscriber, please subscribe. Subscribe button is down there, or in the corner there's a little thing you can tick. There's a little bell notification if you want to get notifications of all new releases on the channel. If you like the video, of course, pop a like, and if you have any comments, stick them in the comment field below. So without trying to confuse you or me anymore, let's head on over to the video footage that was left over, that I didn't put part 1 and is now in part 2. So let's get on over and see what I've done and what I've got left to do. Something like that. So thanks for watching. Sit back, relax, enjoy the video. I'll be back at the end. So this video is mainly about decals and 2K. So the first obvious starting point and first obvious step is removing some parts from the sprue. However, there is a good reason for this. So I'm removing the frame from the sprue. Because of the decal scheme, that there's kind of continuity of the decals across multiple panel parts. So the best way to get the decal scheme correct is basically to tack up the frame and actually attach the body panels to the frame, and that way it's easier to get all those decals lined up. And I'll remind you about that later on in the voiceover to show you exactly where it is important. So yeah, so basically there's the main two frame parts. There is a spacer down at the back. So all that's basically just been taped in using some Tamiya masking tape. And then it's a case of figuring out how to attach the body parts. Now, as is quite common with Tamiya bike kits, there'll be some screws involved. But obviously I didn't want to necessarily take out all the screws at this stage, so I wanted to check and see exactly what was needed. As is usual, the screws will be found in a little bag with the tires and probably some vinyl hose as well, which is kind of standard for Tamiya kits. So a couple of very, very small screws. Obviously, you know, words of caution here, that the paintwork is fresh, it's unprotected. It can be very easy to scratch it by dropping your screwdriver just like that. Luckily enough, I got away with that one. And no problems on the other side. So just a couple of screws and that part is reasonably secure. So then there's the front fairing as well. So the bottom section of front fairing just needs a little bit of masking tape just to hold it in place. But I decide to remove it while I get the side panels on first, because they actually sit over the side panels as well. So once again, there's a couple of screws that need to go in. Once again, I will urge care at this stage. Be very, very careful. You don't want to ruin any hard work you would have done at this stage. And then as you can see, that bottom part of the fairing just kind of clips over. Like so. And there we go. So one of the benefits of having everything on the frame like that is essentially at this stage you can use the frame as something to hold. So you don't have to hold the bodywork, you don't have to risk touching any of the decals. So for this kit, I'm got hold of some TB decals for the 2021 scheme. So that comes with the addition of some basically Monster sponsorship as well. So this is actually where my first big mistake was. So these TB decals are basically one untrimmed sheet of decals, which it wasn't obvious when I looked at the decal sheet. It only became obvious once they were soaked in water. So I've had to try and cut them once they've already released from the water, and that is not the easiest thing to do. So once again, an element of care, but somehow I managed to do it. Now, made it a lot more difficult to trim it completely, but not impossible, and we managed to get away with it this time. So there is a huge amount of decal work. There's a huge amount of kind of setting, heating, decal solutions. So I'm going to speed it all up. It's still even long when it's sped up. But it kind of captures it. It's so you can see exactly, well, pretty much every single step of the decal process. So I don't use microset anymore. Basically just use the water to help slide the decal into place. And then I'm using the UMP decal solutions. So I'm using the normal and the strong. I don't think I need to go to extra strong, either the TB decals or the Tamiya ones. And that seemed to work fine. That seemed to settle the decals in place quite well. But obviously there is an element of kind of heat, repeat, decal solution, mop it up, kind of burnish the decal down into place with basically a paintbrush I just use for decaling, and just keep on doing that until you get everything conformed into shape. Now, I'm going to play a little bit of music, but I'll try and drop in every now and again with some, what should we say, pearls of wisdom, maybe? More likely statements of stupidity, but that's exactly what I'm going to try to do. So I'll drop in every now and again, but let's cue some music.
So it's actually this kind of trio of decals here. This is why it's important to attach it to the frame. Getting these visually lined up for that kind of Suzuki name across the side of the bike. That's the important reason to have everything attached together. As you can see, we've gotten the decals down, a little bit of heat, back with the solutions. Work those decals into any of the recesses, a bit more heat, a bit more decal solution, heat, repeat, etc. So let's get back to the music. So it's around about this point that I make another mistake with the decals. So the Black Monster uh, sponsorship is just a little bit too long and runs over the number 36 on the front. But there's nothing I can do about it at this stage, so I just gotta accept it and move on. So it's not quite as per bike, but these things happen. So now the final part of decaling is some of the carbon fiber parts for the front aerodynamic aid or anti-wheelie device. So luckily enough, I managed to get a copy of the Studio 27 pattern, which my mate Luke Ward over at Scale Motor was able to cut out basically all the carbon shapes for me on his Cricut Cricut machine. So that saved a lot of kind of measuring up and making my own templates, and will prove very, very useful for this part and for subsequent parts of the build as well. So this is the final part of the deckling, so just a little bit of music left for this bit, and then we can get on to the 2K. So these decals can be left to cure for at least 24 hours, but I think in what I did was probably about a week before we came back for this stage. So this stage is the 2K stage. So 2K is clear coat, basically come from the automotive industry. It's basically a two-part mix. So first coat, basically just trying to get down a tack coat. One of the most important coats, because that's the coat that the subsequent coats will actually adhere to. So this stuff gets incredibly sticky as it starts to cure, and that stops it running. It's also very slow curing, so it self-levels as well. So for this particular clear coat, I'm gone back to using Pro Range 2K. Not because it's necessarily the best, but I did buy it. There is a lot of it, and I hate waste. So it is incredibly good value. It is a good clear coat. It's incredibly good value. For £20, you get quite a big bottle. I think it's a litre or half litre. Yeah, I think it's a half litre of the clear, which when you mix it up in a 2-to-1 ratio with a hardener, gives you quite a bit of 2King, because you basically use about 6 mil minimum. Yeah, so between 6 and 10 minimum for each kit. So as you can see, I've kind of sped up the footage again. So we're just going to blast our way through this first coat. Again, you're trying to get down a light coat, what I like to call basically like a clear pebbly dash type coat. So you're not looking for a shiny coat, but it's got to have an element of shine, and that'll be the sticky coat for the subsequent clear coats. At this stage, you can still get any kind of dust or flakes out, as you've seen a couple of times I've done that. And that kind of helps keep, well, you can basically pull any stray hairs, bits of dust, bits of fluff out at this stage. Once you get to the second and third coat, well, second coat is much more dangerous. By the third coat, you just can't touch it. You will risk ruining it trying to remove any debris or fluff. So that's coat 1. We're on to coat 2. So this is the first coat. We're trying to get a shiny coat. As you can see, it's starting to come up quite shiny. That will self-level when it's set aside for about 10 to 15 minutes. What I will say on this particular kit is I went back to the 0.15 needle in the H&S Infinity. I have to say, with the Pro Range 2K, that was hard work. I think that's too small a needle for how thick Pro Range is. So it meant I was trying to blast through quite a lot of material through a very, very small opening. And the actual spray pattern is very, very narrow. So it ended up very close to the work, which is not ideal. But however, it does end up with quite a thin clear coat because you're not putting down as much material as you would with, say, a 0.35 in the Apex or a 0.4 in the H&S. But I think I prefer the 0.4 in the H&S for doing my 2K work. But I'll reserve judgment on that for a moment. But I think definitely the 0.15 is not going to be used again for this type of clear coat. So as you can see, I'm just working through the parts methodically, working my way up onto the second coat, starting to build up that clear coat. I'm trying to make sure there's not much orange peel at this stage. And there we go. We're back in for coat number 3. Now, coat number 3, that's the finishing coat. So basically, whatever you get on the surface at this stage, that's what it's going to look like. A little bit of kind of orange peel will probably self-level out, but you really don't want it at this stage, because if you do end up with some orange peel, it's just more work when you get to flatten back and polishing at the later stages once it's cured. But all in all, it's starting to look quite good. Now, the disappointing part kind of comes from the decals again on this. You can see the outline of those TB decals. I think the color's quite close. The black I've used is very close to the black on decals, but it's almost like there's a little bit of a kind of ghost outline on the decal itself, which means it's just about visible. Not as obvious, certainly not as obvious when it's under the clear coat, but enough that I know it's there, and if I look at it closely enough, I can see it. So not the best decal scheme in the world, or not the best decal set. So as the 2K process gets toward the end, so I'm into the final coat. I'm on the final stretch. So all these parts will be put in a dust-proof box for at least 4 to 5 hours. That'll give them a chance to at least initially cure, make them dust-proof. It won't have hardened. It'll take 3 or 4 days to harden. The longer you leave it, the harder the coat will be, and after a week, that clear coat will be rock solid. And that will be perfect for flattening back any dust spots, any kind of remnants of any orange peel if there is any, and then that can be flattened back with some micromesh and then polished up. But that'll probably be covered at a latter stage of the build. So by the time we get around to that, it'll probably be a couple of months sat curing. So overall, I'm generally happy with the clear coat. It's not perfect. It is nice and thin. I think using the smaller needle did help that. But I think I've ended up with a few orange peel spots. So that I'll address those later. They won't get looked at for quite a while. Certainly not until one of the latter parts. So after about a week, everything is reasonably well cured. I can store it away in a box like this. So let's get back to me for final thoughts.
So, I told you I'd be back. I'm back. Part 2, done and dusted. Got the body work up to the clear coated stage. Is it as good as I wanted? Yeah, there's a little bit of imperfection in it. I think I went a little bit heavy with some of the paintwork. I think that didn't really show through until I did the clear coat. The little bit of a mistake I made with the seam line on the underside from part one and the body work, a little bit more obvious now, so a little bit disappointing. The decals I went with, the TB decals, are not great. I know Blue Stuff, I believe, have this scheme as well with with kind of a fuller set of decals rather than the TB ones, which just had the additional kind of monster sponsorship. I would probably look at the Blue Stuff ones if I was going to do another scheme. I think Blue Stuff have brought out the 2022 scheme as well for this bike, so I may try them in a future build. As ever, you know, I'm still quite impressed with with what came out. So even though I didn't like the decals, a little bit of a paint flow, one or two paint flaws here and there, one or two construction errors, I'm reasonably happy with how far we've got. As has often happened with bikes with me, sometimes those little flaws kind of weigh on my mind. Once I get into like the engine and stuff and the frame and build that up, it kind of re-inspires me and I kind of get re-engaged in it. So that will be kind of the upcoming kind of bits on the bench. So let's see how that progresses. So thanks for watching. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe, hitting the subscribe button down below. There's a bell notification if you want to get notified of videos. Please do so. And if you like the video, please drop a like. If you have any comments, stick them in the field below. Yeah, and that's about it for part 2. So thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with this Suzuki build. Thank you for sticking with my ramblings and how I've split up part 1 and part 2. The fact that I recorded the intros and outros for part 1 and part 2 with knowing exactly where I was going to stop part 1 and move into part 2. I think I got away with it. We'll figure that out when I do the editing and see if it works. And I may have to record some random videos from a hotel in Scotland because I'm off to Scotland on some holiday time next week. How's ever, as I said already, thanks for watching. If you're not a subscriber, I'd like to see you come back to the next video, so don't forget to subscribe. And we'll see you all very soon. Bye bye for now.